In this episode, we talk about the deaths of 31 patients in a government-run hospital in Maharashtra's Nanded. We also give you an update on Operation Ajay, which is facilitating the safe return of Indians from Israel. But first, we talk about a Supreme Court hearing regarding a petition concerning the medical termination of a pregnancy. Hi, I'm Rahel Philipose, and you are listening to Three Things, the Indian Express News Show. Last week, a three-judge bench led by the Chief Justice of India, D.Y. Chandrachud, began hearing a petition filed by a woman who is seeking to terminate her 26-week pregnancy. This case has raised questions regarding a woman's rights over her body after 20 weeks of pregnancy and the extent to which these rights may change depending on the woman's circumstances and the health of the fetus. To know more about this case, my colleague Shashank Bhargava speaks to the Indian Express's Apurva Vishwanath in this segment.
So, Apurva, at the center of this case is this 27-year-old woman. Talk about who she is and what is this dilemma that she's facing?
So what we have before the court is a situation where a 27-year-old married woman wants to terminate her pregnancy. She is already 26 weeks pregnant, and by her record in the court, along with her husband, she's visited a number of doctors and hospitals seeking termination of pregnancy. But because she was beyond her 20-week limit that the law permits, she was refused an abortion. So now she's before the Supreme Court asking for permission to terminate her pregnancy.
Right, and before this matter reached the court, a 6-member medical board looked at the case. Could you talk about what the board decided on the matter?
So the petitioner's argument is that this pregnancy was unplanned. She's a mother of 2 boys already. One is 4 years old, the other one is just 1 year old. And she says that this pregnancy was not planned, and she's already suffering from postpartum depression after her second child was born. And she says she's currently under medication for depression. So that could also affect the health of this fetus. So with this context, on 9th October, a 2-judge bench of Justices Hima Kohli and B.V. Nagaratna, they in fact spoke to the petitioner on video conference, convinced themselves that the woman is not under any pressure from her family to terminate, but she herself wants to terminate this pregnancy, and then allowed the termination. So the court order was a directive to AIIMS to allow termination of pregnancy. However, what happens next is that AIIMS wrote back to the court saying that the fetus is viable and there is a heartbeat. So they would need a specific directive from the Supreme Court on whether a feticide, which is basically stopping the fetal heartbeat, can be done before termination. What AIIMS was essentially saying is that if the fetus is removed without stopping the heartbeat, then it is a premature birth of a child, and that child can still survive outside the mother's womb, which is what fetal viability means. So in this situation, the doctor basically has her own dilemma and wrote to the court. Another hearing happens, and in the second hearing, the same set of judges disagree on their earlier decision. Justice Hima Kohli said that her judicial conscience does not permit the petitioner to terminate the pregnancy. However, we see that Justice Nagaratna says that the primacy must be to the decision of the woman, and even courts should respect the decision of the woman.
Right, so Justice Kohli is saying that she cannot allow the termination of this fetus, and Justice Nagaratna is saying that it is basically up to the woman.
Yeah, so Nagaratna says, I will not supplant the court's conscience, with the conscience of the woman. If she wants an abortion, that should be respected by the court.
And Apurva, you mentioned earlier that 20 weeks is the period where decisions regarding what a mother can choose to do with the fetus change. Could you elaborate on that and talk about what the rules regarding that are?
So the legislation that we have, that is the Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act, allows for abortion in 2 stages. After a crucial amendment in 2021, up to 20 weeks, a woman can, on the advice of one doctor, seek an abortion. And if a pregnancy is between 20 to 24 weeks, that would be an exception. And that abortion is determined by 2 registered medical practitioners under specific circumstances. This is basically when there is a forced pregnancy. So there are 7 categories of forced pregnancies that the rules under the MTP Act state. So this is about, whether if it's a minor, if it's sexual assault or incest, or if there is like a change of marital status during the pregnancy. That means, you got divorced during the pregnancy, or if you became a widow during the pregnancy, or for women with physical or mental disabilities. So these are certain set circumstances when a team of 2 doctors can perform an abortion. These are exceptions, of course. So, but after 24 weeks, the MTP requires a medical board to be set up, which can allow or, deny termination of pregnancy only if there is substantial fetal abnormality. So basically, after 20 weeks, the decision to terminate pregnancy is shifted from the hands of the mother to a team of doctors.
Right, and one of the things that the 6-member medical board had highlighted was that the baby is already viable and it has a very reasonable chance of survival.
Yes, this is what the medical board says. But in similar circumstances, there have been several cases where the court has allowed for termination and the board has complied with it. Just, a couple of months ago on 21st August, a bench headed by Justice Nagaratna held a special sitting on a Saturday to allow termination of pregnancy of a rape survivor from Gujarat. That was at 27 weeks and 3 days. And last year, a bench headed by Justice Chandrachud allowed abortion for an unmarried woman who was 24 weeks pregnant. That was in a consensual relationship. So there have been cases where the court has allowed for termination beyond 26 weeks as well. However, most of those cases, have involved rape survivors or minors. And that seems to be the key difference in this case. The marital status of the woman, which indicates that the conception is consensual. It's not a forced pregnancy in that sense. So that poses a dilemma maybe even for the doctors or anyone else involved.
Right. So what you're saying is that because she's a married woman, because she's not a minor, there is no sexual assault, and the fetus seems to be healthy, that is one of the reasons that the 2-judge bench was divided about it.
Yes. And if you look at Justice Nagaratna's opinion, she says that an unplanned pregnancy, an unwanted pregnancy, is the same as a forced pregnancy because the difference is that the woman does not want it. So in that sense, Nagaratna puts an unplanned pregnancy also within the domain of the exceptions given in 20 to 24 week terminations, right? Which is a liberal interpretation of the exceptions for abortion.
Right, and after the 2-judge bench disagreed and couldn't come up with a consensus, then the matter went to a larger bench, which heard the matter on Thursday. Talk about what this bench, which was headed by the Chief Justice of India, said about the matter.
So the 3-judge bench is now going to hear the case afresh. Here, time is really ticking, and the court asked for a fresh report from AIIMS on fetal viability. Although from its earlier report, it's very clear that there is fetal viability. And that is a new sort of benchmark that the court is relying on, if it does rely on fetal viability. This is a standard that we've seen been applied in the US till recently, till their landmark ruling of Roe v. Wade was in place. Now we know that that ruling has been overturned by the US Supreme Court last year. But Roe v. Wade put the test of fetal viability as a benchmark. In India, that's not been the case. Indian law has been even ahead of, the liberal stand in the US. And that's something that the Chief Justice said, that our law is liberal and pro-choice. But his observations also conveyed that the bench felt that there is a need to balance out the rights of the unborn child. And this is really the difference that the AIIMS report will now make. The doctors will have to consider whether the depression medication that the woman has been taking, if that is likely to have any impact on the fetus, or if, anything else can be done. So it's essentially buying time for a couple of days. And today, when the court comes back to hear this case, it is that decision that the bench must make. Because the woman has been sort of steadfast and repeatedly told the court that she does not want to raise a child because there are financial constraints and, she's not in perfect mental health to be able to provide for this child.
And Apurva, the Chief Justice said that we have to balance out the rights of the unborn child. Now, this phrase, rights of the unborn child, has this phrase been used in this context before?
So, It's not that the courts have expressly recognized the rights of an unborn child. We do have some examples on the rights of an unborn child. For example, in estate laws, right? In succession, an unborn child has a right to inherit ancestral property, for example. Or say, for that matter, the legislation that bans sex determination. The basis of that legislation is to protect the rights of the unborn child, which is a female unborn child. And we also have provisions in the CRPC which provide for postponement of death sentences awarded to pregnant women. That is also in a way to protect the rights of an unborn child. But in context of abortion, Indian courts have not expressly talked about the rights of an unborn child. In fact, in 2005, the Rajasthan High Court rejected a challenge to the constitutional validity of this MTP Act, the Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act, on the grounds that it violates the fundamental right of an unborn child. However, what is in common parlance is the understanding is that once there is fetal viability, there are voices which call that an unborn child and that there is a right on the part of the state to protect that unborn child. But if you look at medical advancement, fetal viability has been an arbitrary line, is what a lot of critics would argue. For example, the Roe v. Wade case that we talked about. In that case, fetal viability was pegged at around 28 weeks, which is about 7 months pregnancy. But now the threshold has come down to about 23 or 24 weeks, which is more or less 6 months. And there are newer studies which show that this could, further be pegged down at 22 weeks. So if fetal viability is something that can, be advanced with better science, then is that a valid standard to determine whether a woman has decisional autonomy or not?
And Apurva, we understand that the woman does not want to continue with the pregnancy. But in these discussions that she's had with the doctors and even the medical board, has the option of adoption been considered?
Yes, this, Additional Solicitor General Aishwarya Bhati, in fact, told the court that she would personally make sure that there is care taken and the woman can give her baby up for adoption. But the question is not really so much about what to do with the child when the child is born, but right now on whether the woman can control her body. Can you force a woman to carry a fetus to term if she does not want it? Especially when the same timelines have been applied to, say, a rape survivor, a minor, and if the same timeline can be applied to a married woman who's had consensual sex. So decisional autonomy should mean the same for everyone in that situation.
And next we talk about the death of patients in a Maharashtra hospital. Earlier this month, 31 patients lost their lives in a government-run hospital in the Maharashtrian city of Nanded over the course of 2 days. This happened at the Dr. Shankarrao Chavan Government Medical College and Hospital, which receives patients from across the district and neighbouring states like Telangana. On average, the hospital sees an annual footfall of more than 6 lakh patients. The crisis has now raised multiple questions about government-run healthcare facilities in the state, including concerns about insufficient staff and the shortage of medicines. To know more about the situation, my colleague Utsa Sarmin speaks to the Indian Express's Rupsa Chakraborty in this segment.
So Rupsa, can you first tell us about the people who lost their lives in the Nanded Hospital? What kind of treatments did they come for?
So all the patients who died, they were admitted specially in the pediatric ward, medicine, chest TB and surgery. Many of the patients who succumbed during these 48 hours had internal bleeding, unknown poisoning. Some of them had pneumonia, sepsis. Out of the 7 neonatal deaths, most of these infants or newborn babies were being referred from different hospitals, especially private hospitals. So according to the hospital dean, when they came to the hospital, the infants were already in a very serious condition. So according to the hospital dean, these serious conditions or the late referral of the patient led to their death.
But Rupsa, we understand that one of the main reasons that is being cited for this is the lack of medicines available in the hospital, right?
Yes. So before understanding the situation, we have to understand the medicine procurement procedure in Maharashtra. So in 2017, Hafkin Institute was made the apex body of procuring and supplying medicines across all the government hospitals, PHCs and dispensaries in Maharashtra. Now, since that time, every year, the institute failed to procure the adequate number of medicines, which lead to shortages of drugs in all the government hospitals. And this has been happening on a regular basis.
Right, and after several complaints, the Maharashtra government had passed a law this year and created a committee which would procure the medicines for every hospital instead of the Hafkin Institute. And you have written that this committee also failed to procure the medicines, right?
Yes, because it took a very long time for the government to select the committee members or to float the tender. So the committee was formed in March, but it took them around 5 to 6 months to float the tender only in the month of August. So there was a complete shortages of medicine all across Maharashtra. So same with this hospital, like many other district hospitals, the dean of the hospital was addressing the shortages of medicine by procuring it locally. But again, it was not sufficient to meet the demand of such a big district hospital. So when the incident happened, when 31 patients died in 48 hours, the opposition raised the issue that the hospital didn't have the required number of medicine, which delayed the essential treatment of the patients, which ultimately led to their death.
But Rupsha, you have reported that the hospital did not spend a single penny in procuring medicines or equipment. Can you tell us what did you find out when you checked the budget?
So, considering the shortages of medicine, the dean had informed me that he was procuring the medicine locally through the hospital budget. But when I checked the budget of the hospital, it was very quite shocking to see that the hospital didn't spend a single penny for the procurement of medicine or for the procurement of machines and the repairing of the machines. So when Indian Express asked the hospital management about it, they refused to comment on it. But considering that zero expenditure was made on the budget, it is quite clear that the hospital authority was lying to the media when the opposition raised the issue. This was an exposure to say how the hospital failed to meet the medicine requirement of the patients, which could have led to the health complications of the admitted patient.
And many political parties also allege that the deaths occurred due to shortage of medical staff in the hospital, even though the dean of college refuted the allegations. Can you tell us how understaffed they are currently?
So this Nanded District Hospital, it is a government medical college. So they have professors, assistant professor, associate professor and senior resident doctors who run the hospitals. So these are the medical strength of the hospital. So when I got the information from my source, I got the data of total number of available strength of the medical staff. I found out that 42% of the sanctioned posts were lying vacant, including professors who are designated as the head of the department from important departments like pediatrician, surgery, orthopedic were absent, like the posts were never filled.
And the doctors you have spoken to, what do they have to say about this and how it affects patient care?
So now considering again, this hospital is a district hospital which has a huge patient load across the district. For such kind of big tertiary care hospital not having an HOD for such important department is very concerning, because suppose if you don't have teachers, then who will train the students, right? Senior resident doctors and junior doctors, they are also students. They learn under these professors. So in the absence of senior doctors who are teachers, these resident doctors don't get the adequate number or quality training. So this also compromises the treatment quality given to the patients. And the existing resident doctors or the senior doctors would have to work extra hours, like maybe as the students complained, they had to work for 24 hours to 48 hours continuously without taking a break, just to meet the huge gap in the supply and demand of doctors. So what happens when you work continuously? The existing faculties or the existing doctors become very irritated, and this also affects their proper diagnosis or treatment care of the patient. So for tertiary care hospital, it is essential to have at least 80% of the medical staff, especially the senior doctors, who are there to guide the junior doctors while giving treatment to patients.
And can you tell us what kind of actions the government has taken after this incident to address the staff and medicine shortages in the state-run hospitals?
So the government has now passed a government resolution, saying that they will fill up the post of the nurses, which is around 5,000 vacant posts across Maharashtra, which will now be filled up. Simultaneously, the government has declared that they will fasten the process of recruitment of the doctors, especially in the rural district hospitals. So these are the two immediate steps that are being taken by the government after this incident. And it will take time to address the issues faced by Hafkin Institute and the recently formed committee to address the shortages of medicine. So in the meantime, the government has given full-fledged power to the dean of the district hospital to procure medicine. Earlier, they could only use 10% of their budgetary provision for the procurement of medicine. But now the dean has been given the power to procure medicine directly from the budget allocated to district planning committee.
Right. Now, Rupsha, this is not the first time we are seeing this happen in Maharashtra. In fact, in August, a similar incident happened in a hospital in Thane, where around 18 patients had died. So what kind of actions do you think the government needs to take to improve patient care in the state-run hospitals?
Maharashtra is the second most populated state in India. Considering its high-class healthcare facilities, the state receives patients from across the country, especially from states like Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, West Bengal. To address such heavy burden or footfall of patients, it is important for such a big state to have a very strong medical infrastructure. As we had seen during COVID, how the state was struggling to address the health issues raised during COVID because of lack of infrastructure. Now, taking lesson from it, it is essential for the state to invest more, to give more budgetary allocation in their annual finance budget so that they can strengthen the infrastructure. The state has a plan to start 9 more medical colleges, which is a welcoming step. But along with that, they will also have to procure medicines, equipments, and first of all, fill up the huge gap in the manpower supply. They need to hire seniors, specialists, and also junior class 4 employees, which I think, considering for human developmental index, having adequate and strong health infrastructure is one of the points that I think the government needs to focus.
And in the end, we give you an update on Operation Ajay. On Saturday, the third batch of 197 Indians who wanted to leave Israel amidst the war with Hamas left for India on a special flight. These special flights are part of the Indian government's Operation Ajay, which was launched last week to facilitate the return of Indian nationals who are stranded in Israel and who wish to return back to India. The passengers are chosen on a first-come, first-served basis after the Indian Embassy launched a drive for all Indians to register at the mission's database. The first charter flight from Israel carried 212 people on Thursday, and the second batch of 235 Indian nationals were flown back late on Friday. When the first batch of Indian evacuees left Israel last week, the Indian ambassador Sanjeev Singla said that the Indian Embassy is ensuring the safety of all the Indian citizens there.
The Embassy of India in Tel Aviv has been working continuously to ensure the safety and welfare of all our Indian citizens in Israel. Yesterday, the External Affairs Minister announced Operation Ajay to help those Indians who wish to return to India. And today, under that Operation Ajay, the first flight is going back to India. It's going to have almost 200 Indian citizens. These are students.
And when this first batch landed in New Delhi, they were welcomed by the Union Minister Rajiv Chandrasekhar, who said that the central government's mission is to never leave any Indian behind.
This is completely in keeping with our Prime Minister's vision, Prime Minister's determination that our government, his government, will never leave any Indian behind. Any Indian anywhere in the world that finds himself or herself in harm's way, our government, our Prime Minister is determined to protect them, bring them back home safely. And I'm very glad this plane load of students and Indians have managed to fly back safely. And I think
there are about 18,000 Indian nationals living and working in Israel, including caregivers, students, several IT professionals, and diamond traders. This voluntary departure of Indian nationals started after the militant group Hamas launched an unprecedented attack on Israel by land, air, and sea on the 7th of October. Since then, the attack has killed more than 1,300 people in Israel, while the Israeli counter airstrikes have killed at least 1,900 people in Gaza. You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. It was hosted by me, Rahel Philipose, and written and produced by Utsa, Sarmin and Shashank Bhargava. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone who you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Podcast and write to us at podcast@indianexpress.com.